Escalation podcast called Rosenberg Radio kicking in right now. Tonight is going to be an epic podcast as my boy Dennis Brew walks in confidently, author, writer of Imprisoned by Addiction. Thank you so much for being here, bro. It's going to be a treat, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we're going to dissect his life. We're going to go through the wins, the losses. We're going to overcome right now. A book has been written. You're in for a treat. Escalation podcast. My boy Dennis Brew, Imprisoned by Addiction. He's going to tell his story tonight. You're in for a treat. Stay tuned. One. Escalation podcast called Rosenberg here, cracking in on another fascinating evening. The podcast today is a little bit different from the norm. Why? I am blessed and honored to have a profound guest with me tonight, Dennis Brew, author and writer of Imprisoned by Addiction. We're going to dial into this. There's a lot of jewels that are going to be coming out of here. There's a lot of life-changing info that you can not only hear but apply to your life. However, you always know how I crack in the show. So let me take a moment right now and give a big shout out to the entire crew that's here. Thank you, Manny, for being so official on the camera. Big shout out to Lou. Thank you, bro, looking official on the camera. Big shout out to Charles, holding us down, making sure everything looking crisp. And of course, my boy A.T. Jones, I popped in the house. Thank you so much, bro, for being here. Bong, bong, bong. We're in for a treat tonight. As I said before, my guest is Dennis Brew. Thank you so much, bro. I really, and if I were to go back and share how we met and the initiative you took, let me do that. So my Heineken sign broke, and Dennis is integral in, repairing stuff like that. So I went and I met you out of the blue. Yeah. You took care of my Heineken sign, and as I was leaving, you asked me, hey, you got so much Heineken gear on. What do you do? I share about my podcast, and you hand me this book immediately. Yeah. Riveting read. And I was like, I told the crew, I need to get him here to hear your story. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, my friend. So let's dig into this. Imprisoned by Addiction, my story of drug addiction and surviving the county jail. And we're talking about the Passaic County Jail here.
Yes.
Oh my God, we're in for a treat. Escalation podcast, my boy, Dennis Brew. Let's crack into this, Dennis. You've definitely gone on a colorful ride to where you are right now. I want to go back to the beginning. Let me ask you, what was the family makeup like when you came onto this gorgeous earth?
Came from a good family. I came from educated parents. My father was an attorney. My mother was an editor of a newspaper. I'm the youngest of three boys. So what I kind of learned throughout life and in some recovery is that addiction does not discriminate. You know
what's so funny is on this show, when you say something profound, we call it dropping a jewel. Right out the bat, you just dropped a jewel. Addiction knows no color, no race, no social stature. Everybody's impacted by that. And here you are growing up in a perfect, ideal, somewhat American household.
Yeah.
Three brothers.
Yep.
Where are you in the rank of the three? Oldest, middle, or youngest?
I'm the youngest.
Were you the rambunctious youngest?
I guess I was the black sheep of the family, and my parents were all about grades. From the earliest age I can remember, I wanted to have fun. I wanted to have fun at all costs. And they were all about grades. And let me tell you, schoolwork was not fun, right? So if it wasn't fun, I wanted nothing to do with it. So I got bad grades, and I was constantly being grounded and punished for my grades. I had my brothers that were older than me. We're all 14 months apart.
Okay.
Right? So they got their exercise beating me up. Right? So early in the game, I felt less than physically. I felt less than mentally. Now, I don't know if this contributed to the factors, but I did not feel like I measured up.
Let me ask you, how was your other brothers doing academically at the time?
Straight A's. And I was D's and F's. So it didn't feel good. If it didn't feel good, I wanted nothing to do with it. And if it felt good, I wanted everything to do with it. For instance, after school, my brothers would come home. They go and do their homework immediately. I said, are you crazy? We just been locked up for 8 hours. Let's do that later. We'll go outside. Let's go play. Let's do something. And therein lies and in the 70s, when you got grounded, to your room for 2 weeks, there was nothing to do in there.
No video games.
There was no video games. There was no TV.
TV.
You know, I still didn't do it. I had all that time to sit there and just do my homework.
And what did you do in that room? Everything but the homework.
Everything but the homework. I just sat there. I'd rather just not do it.
What was mom's and dad's reaction to your lack of motivation academically?
Well, they motivated me with wooden spoons and belts and, you know, you name it.
Yeah.
Like pain was the motivator, but like with all that motivation, I still did not want to do it. Here, I'll give you an example. The first drug I ever used was candy, right? I was a fiend for candy. I committed my first theft. I was young enough that I needed the kitchen chair. I pushed it up against the refrigerator. I stood on the chair, and on top of the refrigerator was a jar. My brother had silver quarters in that jar, right? They were worth more than 25 cents because they were silver.
Yeah.
I stole his silver quarters. I went to the store. I bought a 10-pack, right? A 10-pack of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. I ate like 8 of them and threw the last 2. I went home. My brother gave me the beating because he knew exactly who stole his silver quarters, right? So that was like my first drug. I did my first theft for that.
For the candy.
And here's how it kind of relates to what happened to me with drugs later on in life. Now, candy to me was good. And so I figured if you got a hold of candy, that's good. We were in the supermarket. My brother hands me this clear rock. It was wintertime. He says, "Here, Dad, here's some rock candy." Rock candy, right?
Yeah.
I said, well, candy, like the alarm bells were going off.
Connection.
I put it in my mouth. It was disgusting.
What was
I
it?
spit it out. I thought, this candy is supposed to be good. It can't be this bad. I put it back in my mouth. It's still bad. I spit it out again. I thought maybe the outer layer was going to wear off of the thing and get
And the
sweet,
sweet is on the inside.
because it was supposed to be good. Candy's good.
Yeah.
I put it back 3 or 4 times. I was green. I was so sick. He gave me rock salt for the driveway when you melt the ice, right? But that so parallels what happened to me later on in life when I started using drugs. I had a lot of fun. And then what happened was when it wasn't so fun, I still had that thought that, well, it's supposed to be fun. It's not fun right now, but it's supposed to be fun. So I'm going to keep going and going
Turn
and
it
going.
into fun.
So, you know, those kind of things parallel.
What I love about what you just shared, and I'm going to ask you this question before I make this comment. If you could, looking back, can you remember the first time you made the association with not wanting to do homework and just going for the fun stuff? Can you remember what it was? Because it seems ironic that you come from an established family where the other brothers who are older, who are setting examples, are doing their work, they're following mom and dad's protocol and doing their work. So when was it that you were like, you know what, screw this?
I remember I was in kindergarten, and my mother bought me these ugly Buster Brown shoes, right? And I had a pair of red Converse sneakers.
Oh, those were
right?
hot.
Yeah, they were. I was in kindergarten. I wanted to wear those sneakers to school, and she said, "You can't wear those sneakers to school." So we had show and tell, and I remember I disguised. I put my sneakers in this box that was supposed to be a grill, like a barbecue grill, one of them cheap ones in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I was going to sneak my sneakers to school and put them on. My mother caught me.
Dude, you're a gangster out the box. What did she do?
She beat me up.
It's
My mother had no issue with smacking me,
yeah.
right? And I was scared to death. My mother was a professional at it. And my father could just, I don't know what's going on with the kids nowadays, but my father could just give me a look.
And that would
And you stopped. Whatever it was you were doing, you stopped.
immediately.
Yeah.
Wow, Dennis. It is, and you know, I know we're going to be in for a treat because the fact that you are so aware now of those small idiosyncrasies that led you down this path from such a young age. The connection with the sweetness for candy, the rebel of not being, you know, conforming to the request of the parents, and really, truly doing things outside the box right from the get-go.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of strength in that because you got to be either stupid or confident to be moving at that pace at that young. So I salute you for sharing that. Let's fast forward a little bit. So now the grades are poor. You're going into elementary and high school. the connection about candy and sweets are still there. How was that transition?
So my father was always a pot smoker, right? And as a young kid, I could always remember the smell of weed. And he said it was Havana tobacco, right? And I thought it was like a cigar or something. I mean, I can remember riding in the middle of him and his friend in a Cadillac.
Yeah.
And watching the bowl get passed between him
The Savannah tobacco.
and the other Savannah tobacco. So somewhere in there around, I don't know when I understood what it was, but my father died when he was 32 years old. I was 12 years old. He died tragically as a result of Quaaludes and alcohol in an Atlantic City hotel. That was an accident. Like, I guess Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, they all died choking on their vomit. Basically passed out in a hotel room and choked to death. And at the time, we were told it was a heart attack. So we didn't know that was the cause. It was maybe 5-6 years later we found out exactly what happened. But so one day, about a month after my father died, my brothers were looking through his dresser drawers, and they came up with like a half ounce of weed. They said, "Come on, Den, let's try it." I remember my reaction like it was yesterday. I said, "No way, that's drugs. I thought if you smoked a joint, you would die," right? I really did. I remember being so against it, like, whoa. Well, they tried it.
Hold that thought. SQR Podcast. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. I want to pick up on that experience because it's so profound that you were the one that said no. We're going to take a quick break. My boy, Dennis Brew, imprisoned by addiction. We're taking a stroll through his life right now. You're in for a treat. Stay tuned. One.
When you first started, you asked me like, okay, where'd you come from, right? And I said to you, like, I come from brokenness. And it is my responsibility to have, the two masters, the Ivy League, the doctorate. Like, it's my responsibility to know that I come from that brokenness. If I don't do anything about it, that brokenness will remain.
SQR Podcast here. Squirrel Rosenberg kicking in with my boy, Dennis Brew. We're taking a very delicate stroll through your life because I know what's about to happen. I can already tell how vulnerable you are. And I want my guests to realize that what you're hearing from Dennis is life-changing info. And you don't have to make the same mistake. You maybe not be as fortunate as him when at the outcome, but the fact that we're dissecting his life right now, you're in for a treat. So before I do that, Dennis, it's always mandatory. I have a green bottle right here. Could you reach to that beautiful refrigerator? I have some non-alcoholic beers right there. Heineken just came out with the 0.0. So you can have one of those. I'll have one of mine, perfect. And I have the perfect Heineken opener here. Let's crack this open. Come on, give me that. Perfect. We are going to crack into this. As a matter of fact, when you hear when you hear me open these beers through the microphone, it sounds just like an ASR commercial. It's just crystal clear. Nice. Dennis, let's pick up from finding the pot. As a matter of fact, you got to close our refrigerator door for me. Thank you.
The barn?
Yeah. You were gripping the barn. No, thank you. So as we were getting ready to dissect this, so Dad left the weed. Well, passed away, and they found your brothers, and you guys found the weed. They take it and go, Dennis, let's try this. Your response was,
"No way, that's drugs. I thought you smoke a joint and die."
One joint, you're out of here.
I didn't know.
So did they smoke?
They did. And the next day, I saw they got up and got dressed for school.
They weren't dead.
And I was all in. I saw that they weren't dead, and I was all in. And what happened that day is I just threw a whole bunch of gasoline on a fire of addiction that was burning in me already. That day changed a lot.
SQR Podcast, Cole Rosenberg. I'm going to ask you to look into the main camera and say that again. That day, what happened?
I just threw a bunch of gasoline on a fire of addiction that was burning already in me prior to that.
Do you remember the first time you smoked weed?
Yes.
What was that experience like for you?
I rode my bike all around town, laughing and thinking that I had a great time. I had a great time for a long time.
So now that association of fun and weed locked in.
Yeah. Well, and there was acceptance. See, I was the kid that hung around with the older kids for acceptance, right? And guess what? I was the kid that really didn't like the taste of beer, but we all played drinking games. We played games like quarters. You bounce a quarter into a shot glass, and then you get it in a shot glass. You tell who to drink. Everybody picked on me because I was the youngest, right? I was like their entertainment. They would get me drunk and drop me off in the middle of town, and I really didn't like it.
And what age are you at this time?
12, 13 years old.
Wow.
So I really didn't like it, but I wanted that acceptance of the older kids, and so I did it. I did things that I didn't want to do for the acceptance.
Do you think the fact that your dad is no longer in the picture kind of fueled? Because you mentioned that your dad had that eye.
Yeah. My father, like I said, he would just look at you and you stopped whatever it was that you were doing. And being beat up by my older brothers constantly, there was an age that I got to where my brothers hit harder than my mother. And as soon as that happened, there was no more rules for me as far as I was concerned.
Okay.
She would ground me or whatever, and I'd just go out because...
Looking back, did you think the loss of your father impacted your mom?
I'm sure it did. It impacted the family, and it impacted my rebellion when she brought different guys into the house. And my favorite line was, "You're not my father. You're not telling me what to do." So I was very rebellious.
You go through this process, and now you're in high school. Did the grades attitude change in high school?
No. Same thing.
Same thing. And I sold weed in high school, and so that makes you kind of popular. When you go to a Catholic school costs money. Yeah. Private education.
So, which translates into the kids having money, which was kind of good for the business that I was in, is selling weed.
Right.
But I was popular. Me and my brothers had the school locked down on. Larry was in transportation, and me and Mike were in distribution. But we had a lot of fun. We used to drink in the woods a lot. Bonfires in the woods.
Right.
And that was like the root of the problem to what happened later on, because I had so much fun. When I started switching drugs, and they weren't as fun, I had this thing, I think they call it euphoric recall, where you can only remember the good times and you never remember the bad times.
Euphoric recall.
So I probably used 20 years after it was no longer fun and it was just a nightmare.
Because you're trying to get back that euphoria.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen somehow. And the worst days, because I did cocaine when I was 16 for the first time.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but I realized at the end of the game, you started really early.
Yeah.
When was the transition from weed to...
16.
16.
Cocaine, 16.
Do you remember the first time you tried cocaine?
Oh, yeah. I went to a Stevie Ray Vaughan concert, Miller Time concerts at the pier.
Yeah.
We took a limo there, and my middle brother said, "Here, Dan, you got to try this." And I remember I wanted more, but he wouldn't give me any more. I was pissed off.
It's amazing that I was anticipating hearing that, just like with the weed, you said, "Oh, that's going to kill you," but
I didn't hesitate on that one.
Hesitate at all. So you tried coke for the first time. What? Because now your reference is weed, correct?
Yep.
What was that difference like?
I thought I had found what I was looking for my whole life. I talk a mile a minute, and it brought me out of myself, and I discovered Washington Heights.
Oh my God, that will do it to you.
And
so that's where you would go to?
Many trips over to the
GWB
Bridge, and I think it was $4 then. But
wow.
But it was short-lived. I think it worked for me for about 6 months.
Why did you? So you graduated from coke to something else?
Yeah, through my 20s, it was all cocaine and crack.
Okay, so let's slow down real quick. So now through high school, 16, you graduated
No, I didn't graduate. No, I dropped out senior year.
Why?
I always passed by the skin of my teeth every year. And senior year, though, I had straight Fs across the board. I wasn't interested in school. My father had died, and my uncle had owned a sign company, and he employed me on my grandfather owned a sign company. I'm a third generation sign guy. Okay, so I worked for my grandfather in the summers. Then my uncle, who liked to smoke pot with us, which I thought was the greatest thing in the world, to smoke pot with your uncle at work.
Yeah.
He took me under his wing and taught me to trade. And by the time I was ready to leave high school,
You were really.
my brothers were going to college, and I found out that one of the employees that worked for my uncle was making $400 a week. And I said, $400 a week? If I can make $400 a week,
Screw college.
I would be. I didn't want to go to college.
Yeah.
I just wanted to work in the sign trade. So my mother told me one day, I was out of the house at 16, right? Junior year of high school, I was out of the house.
Where were you living?
I worked weekends for my grandfather or my uncle, and summers for them, and I rented a room from a friend of mine's mother. And I still
So you're a full-fledged
got to
adult
school.
at 16.
Pretty much.
Wow. So here you are working for grandfather, your uncle. Uncle is mad cool 'cause we were smoking weed together. But you're still working, making money. When did the transition into harder stuff come into play? If you can remember.
I'm thinking by the time I was 17, I was smoking crack.
Why? Because crack had a stigma from back then.
Well, when I first started smoking crack didn't come out yet. Crack was just on the verge of coming out, and it was freebase.
Okay.
And it didn't have all the chemicals, but it was a complicated process. And I remember I was probably smoking cocaine for less than a year when all of a sudden they said, "There's this crack, you can buy it. It's already done." And I didn't have to worry. Usually I'd have somebody do it for me, then I couldn't do any more. So as soon as that became available, then the gloves were off.
And this is early 20s.
No, this is 17.
Still your teens.
Still my teens, because my brother Mike was involved with it with myself also.
Okay.
And he said, "I'm going into the Army. I'm going into basic training, and I can't do this," because he flunked out of college
Okay.
behind smoking crack. So when he graduated from basic training, my grandfather and myself went down there and saw him, and he looked like he was disciplined. So I thought, clean and disciplined. So I thought, well, that's my answer. I'm gonna go in. It's gonna work for me. And it worked as long as I was in basic training for 13 weeks. But when I got out, I was running around in Washington Heights with camouflage clothes on, with stories that I'm going to see at college, a Army buddy. So I met a girl, and I was married with 2 kids at 19.
SQR podcast, Cole Rosenberg. It's amazing the journey you've been through. I got to take a quick break. I want to come back. I want to pick up on, because one of the questions been really haunting me is, you must have been a functional addict, not the typical addict that we saw out here, because you were holding down jobs, So let's take a quick break, come back, let's pick up on that. And then I want to transition to when you got locked up.
Okay.
SQR podcast, my boy, Dennis Brew, Imprisoned by Addiction. Stay tuned. 1.
I would take away, racism. Like I would, be able to, just take away that historical point from our history, because America from a long time has been a racist country, a racist nation for the longest time, and it's hindered us. And you can see the remnants of the past now. So you eliminate racism from America, and we can live in prosperity. But right now, how it looks, it's just not feasible for anybody. So I would eliminate racism.
SQR podcast, Cole Rosenberg here, kicking in with I don't want to use the word entertaining, because it is entertaining actually, but it's also fascinating, the details, the awareness. And I know you have that ability now because you can look back at these stories and realize when that catalyst created this movement. So thank you so much for doing that. And for all the guests that are watching this show right now, listen carefully, because you don't have to throw that gasoline of fire on the addiction that's burning inside of you if you know you're prone for that. This is one of the takeaways I got from your story. So to let everybody can follow up where we are, you're 19, forget college, forget high school, did go to the Army for a brief stint.
Yep.
However, the drug addiction was still there.
Yeah.
You now met a woman who's your wife.
Yep.
What's her name?
Debbie.
Debbie. What was that interaction? Where did you meet Debbie, by the way?
She was one of the kids that worked at my uncle's sign shop. It was his sister. So I met her. He went into the Army. He went in ahead of me, like 2 weeks ahead of me. We were supposed to go together, but he went 2 weeks. So his mother said, "Hey, Eddie's gone. Can you paint my living room?" And then, I got with his sister. So,
So she wasn't using.
No, she never did.
She knew you used?
Yeah.
And she was okay with that?
No, not really. But what would happen, we got married very shortly thereafter. She, it was a shotgun wedding.
Any
like
kids?
They like to say. 2.
What are the
2
names?
kids, Ashley and Janice.
Okay.
And
so that should have probably settled you down a little bit, no?
yeah, it did. When I got married, I remember I went to go out with my friends, and she said, "You're married now. You don't have any friends." Right? She said that. And I said, "Oh, okay." And I probably spent a couple of years working 80, 90 hours a week, 1 day off a month, and just work. And right around the age of 21, right around when I can get into bars, I said, "I'm going out." And that's that. And that kind of, I took off from my addiction again. And what would happen a lot of times, I get paid on Friday, and I'd show up on Sunday. And this is before cell phones, so...
She's no way she'd get in touch with you.
Yeah, she didn't know what happened. And we needed the money for rent and everything else. And
Yeah.
I'd show up with 10 cents in my pocket. And it would happen like every 3 months. And then slowly it just started happening more and more. And after about 6 years, she had about enough.
Yeah.
I went into a couple long-term 6-month rehabs, and I would get out. And the first day out after 6 months, I would use.
Let me ask you this. Do you remember, okay, first, the move to rehab for the first time, that was her suggestion, correct?
The actual first time is, in order for me to leave high school, your parents had to sign you out. So my mother said to me, "I will sign you out of school if you go somewhere with me tomorrow." And you know what I heard? "I will sign you out of school. I don't care where you take me tomorrow. You're getting me out of here?
Let's go.
Let's go." She took me to an outpatient drug rehab program. That's where she took me.
Yeah.
And that was my first introduction to any kind of recovery or any time.
What was
of
that
clean
experience
time.
like?
Well, it kind of woke me up, and I was doing pretty good. I stayed clean for 89 days. Worked for my uncle full time. My brother was getting clean too, and we got our paychecks one Friday, and he pulled out a joint and said, "Come on, Dan, let's try it." I said, "What are you doing?" I thought we were clean. He says, "Oh, I smoked pot last week." And as addicts, we don't need a whole lot of prompting, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I smoked a joint, and I remember getting really high, but feeling really uncomfortable and feeling like, why did I just do that?
Especially after being clean for so long.
Yeah. And then it started a 20-year battle of like coming in and out of detoxes, rehabs, long-term programs, short-term programs, trying to stop losing my marriage, trying to move all over the country thinking that Washington Heights was the problem, and if I could just go to California, maybe that would solve the problem.
So you moved to Cali?
I moved to California.
By yourself or with the fam?
My brother lived out there, and he worked in the sign business too, and we were going to start a sign business together. So I brought a van out there with some tools, and what that turned into is another relapse. And
Because the drug was still there.
the truck was stolen because I was in a wrong area, and my brother came back to New Jersey, and I ended up homeless in California, living on the railroad tracks.
Is there any story looking back that you can remember about the California trip and the California stay?
When I first started writing, the first story I wrote, I called it Fingers. Fingers was the title of the story. And in this area of Long Beach, California, there was some railroad tracks, and it was a very desolate looking place. If the police came down the street and got out of their cars, the first thing they did was shoot their guns in the air. It was an open-air drug market.
Okay.
And I worked for one of the dealers selling crack to people driving by.
To cover your habit.
To cover my habit. And I got a job with a sign company after about 4 or 5 months. I saw a guy, he would pay me in beer. He had a bar tab. And we would go drink at a bar, and at the end of the day, he would give me $20. I'd go down to the track, smoke $20 worth of crack. So anyhow, this dealer that I used to deal with, the Mexican guy, Sal and Tony, they were two brothers. They said to me, one day I said, hey, can you spot me a nickel? And he says, hold on a minute. He came back with a stick about this long, about that wide, about that thick. And he grabbed my hand, he held my fingers like this. He took the stick, and I said, I understood his Spanish, that he was going to hit my fingers like this with a stick.
Oh.
And I said, you're going to hit my fingers with that stick? And he said, yeah. And I said, and you're going to give me a nickel? He said, yeah. A nickel is $5 worth of crack.
Yeah.
And I said, for free? And he said, yeah. So I put my hand out like this. I turned away, and he whacked my fingers. I put my hand out. He gave me a nickel of crack. I went in the back. 10 minutes later, I came back out. I said again. He said, yeah. I held the other hand out.
Are you
I turned the other way. He hit my finger. I smoked $100 worth of crack a night for like a month. Listen, I was missing half of my fingernails, and all the tips of my fingernails were black. And I was happy. I was happy that this guy would give me the stuff, because in my mind, I thought, this is only pain. I'm not going to die from getting my fingers whacked. And that's just how bad I wanted that crack.
Wow.
You know, and it was a nightmare.
I know this is the build-up, and the reason why I took this slow journey to here is because I know when we dig into this, it's going to be a treat. Because the detail you're sharing with me right now, and when I did read through this book, the details that you have here from everything was amazing. Wow. California, you're back to Jersey.
Back to Jersey. I tried heroin for the first time, and I was 30 years old, from 30 to 37. You know, I always had a lot of motor vehicle issues because I never paid tickets.
Who would?
Who would pay? It was either, get high or pay a ticket.
Yeah,
There's no way.
Yeah.
So
can I slow you down and ask you? You knew the danger of heroin.
I did, and I thought that was almost the same type of feeling as that pot in the very beginning. Like, you try heroin, it's a wrap. And one day I was working at a sign company in Connecticut, and I knew one of the workers there used heroin. One day I just woke up and said, I'm going to try it today.
Are you serious?
I did. I woke up, I said, I'm going to try it today. So I said, here's some money for you, and here's some money for me. So, like, he was more than willing.
Yeah.
And I tried it, and I remember I threw up. I got so sick.
Did you shoot it, snort it?
Snorted it. And I put it down. I never tried it again for maybe another year, and then there was in a situation, I was smoking crack, and with crack, it's such a up that somebody offered some heroin to calm you down a little bit, and I used that combination for a little while. And then
that's called speeding.
Speedball, basically. So then one day I couldn't get the crack, and I felt the full effects of the heroin.
Withdrawal.
No, the heroin high without the cocaine.
Okay.
And I could run through $800 in a day with crack. And I tried this little $10 bag, and I was high all day. And I thought, and guess what? I didn't die. I didn't feel like I had pain pills before, and I kind of liked the high of pain pills.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden I realized that in my mind, heroin really wasn't that much worse than a pain pill. And for $10 a day, I could use. But that plan kind of backfired when you build a tolerance, and all of a sudden you got a big habit running around, and it's costing you more and more money every day. I never really broke the law other than driving with a suspended license, this and that. But with the heroin, the gloves came off, and I thought that my problem was I just didn't have enough money. If I had enough money, I don't really have a problem. I really thought that.
Yeah, true.
And so in 1998, I was working, and I fell 40 feet, 4 stories on the job. I was in a crane, and the basket that I was in broke off the end of the crane, and which led to a lawsuit, which led to a bunch of money. And I ran through that money, a lot of money, in just a couple months. And in that couple months, built a monster heroin habit. So,
Wow.
so when the drugs ran out, I was desperate. And then I started committing crimes and started going to jail.
SQR podcast called Rosenberg. Wow. And this is where we're here now.
Yeah.
We've dissected Dennis's journey to right now. I want to take a quick break. I want to come back in, and I want you to tell me, because it seems odd that you had all this money managed right. You could probably still be doing all the drugs you want and still be good to go. But forget managing money. You were just doing the drugs. And now we're going to stealing and robbing, and that's what got us into the Passaic County Jail.
Yes.
We'll take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to go into that journey and surviving the Passaic County Jail. And once we're done, Dennis is going to do a 5 to 3 minute read of an excerpt in his book, so you can understand what's here, and you can pick the book up and get a little bit of taste of everything. SQR podcast called Rosenberg, Dennis Brew, Imprisoned by Addiction. We're taking a stroll through his life right now, and we're going to take a break, come back, and pick up on what happened to get him into the Passaic County Jail system. Stay tuned. 1. SQR podcast, Score Rosenberg, right here, kicking butt with my boy Fly Jones. Another fascinating podcast coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to say no more. The anonymity only multiplies to the fascination of this podcast. You're going to learn about his journey, his ride, and you're going to see what he's doing right now. By the way, the music is off the hook. My boy, Fly Jones, SQR podcast. Yo, what do you want to tell the people, son?
Shit, illegal for life to conclusion, nigga. Let's do it. Keep it going.
That's what I'm talking about. SQR podcast at 1. SQR podcast, Cole Rosenberg here. You know, we're getting ready to get into the fourth and the final segment with my guest, Dennis Brew, author, writer of Imprisoned by Addiction. And we've definitely slowed things down because the anecdotes, the curveballs, the detail to attention that you've shared with us, thank you, my friend. I salute you for that. The beating on the fingers, everything it's really, I can sense the tangibility of the struggle to become clean. You know, and as we navigated these waters, we left off where you came back to Jersey. And this is when life kind of changed.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. You got back to Jersey, you are still addicted to heroin, crack.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, I
No income.
I became homeless. And when you're homeless and you're a heroin addict, when you're withdrawn from heroin, it can be 80 degrees outside and you're freezing cold. It's just one of the symptoms of withdrawal. And so I was homeless, I was desperate. People would leave their cars running at 7-Eleven or
I do
Quick
that.
Check. Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. So I wasn't a sophisticated car thief. I would just jump in the car and I would take it. Mostly first thing I always did was crank the heat in the car. It was freezing and I needed the car to hustle and go places and steal things.
But it's a stolen car.
Yeah, it's a stolen car. And you know what? I was so wrapped up on right here, right now, that every time I got caught with one, it wasn't until they were pulling me out of the car that I really understood the gravity that this is not good.
Slow down. You tried to sneak something by me right there. You said, they tried to pull me out of one. How many cars did you steal?
I stole many cars. I mean, I got many cars, and I got caught with 4 cars. So I got caught with 1 in Jersey City. I did 5 weeks in Hudson County Jail. I got out. 3 weeks later, I got caught with another one in Passaic County. I accepted probation. They were going to let me go for probation. And they said, well, you have another charge in Hudson County. I said, I'm not guilty of that one. I just wanted to get out of there. They let me go.
Wow.
I got caught with another one. They sentenced me to 3 years in state prison. I got out of that.
So I don't want to skip through that process, because I'm pretty sure some revealing things happen through that journey. You know, because number one, you're stealing cars back to back, so you're not learning the lesson.
No.
You go to state prison. Was that a reality check for you?
Yes, it was, but it.
Because
like when I first started going to jail, I'm a kid from the suburbs. I don't know anything about what jail is
lifestyle
about.
of jail, yeah.
And what happened was I started to get institutionalized to where it was comfortable for me. It was the only place I got respect, was in jail. When you're standing in front of McDonald's, homeless, looking like a bum that hasn't showered in 3 weeks, asking people for $1 for a cheeseburger after you just ate out of the dumpster, you tend not to get any respect, and you have very little respect for yourself. Every time I went to jail, I got clean. I worked out, I got big, I got some respect. And all I had was just a small place to manage. I could manage that. I couldn't manage my life outside in society. It was too much with the addiction. So when I got out the last time, I came back on parole, and I did everything that I needed to do. I met a beautiful girl. I was dabbling in pain pills. They were allowed on parole because it was a prescription. And I said to myself, you got to stop this, because this girl is the greatest thing ever. And I did for a couple months. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to make it better. It's just, I'm not going to use, I'm just going to enjoy the time with her better if I use some pills. And that ended up blowing up in my face, and I lost that relationship. And ended up going off the deep end and doing 8 months in the Passaic County Jail.
Which is what inspired this book.
This book picks up in that particular arrest of losing her, going downhill, getting caught in my fourth stolen car, facing 10 years. So they have extended term in New Jersey. If you get convicted of the same felony 3 times, they can double the sentence.
Because you don't learn.
I was looking at 5, so now I was looking at 10. I guess my father, being an attorney, his spirit must have channeled through me.
Yeah.
And this is how I know that God is playing a role in my life. Nobody does prison on the 3rd car and gets probation on a 4th car, which is exactly what happened for me.
Wow.
And I've been basically clean ever since.
So let's slow this down, because you dropped a couple jewels right in between that statement that I don't want to miss it, and I just want to reiterate it for my guest. It was because of a woman that initiated you to become clean in the first place.
Yeah.
However, you weren't disciplined enough to stay clean, and you lost that woman because of that.
Yes.
And because of that, go off the deep end.
Yeah.
Steal a 4th car. Where did you get pulled over?
4th car.
4th and final car.
Let's see.
You remember where you were?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
had to be in Passaic County.
I was on Lower Notch Road
Over here.
on Route 46, wrestling with a cop, trying to run. I ran the car out of gas and came up with a brilliant idea at 3 o'clock in the morning that it was, I saw a house across the street. All the lights were on, and there was 4 cars in the driveway. I thought it was the day after New Year's. I thought maybe they were still partying or something. I made the decision to knock on somebody's door at 3 o'clock in the morning. And when I woke the woman up, she was kind of pissed off. I said, is the gas station up that way? I wasn't quite sure where I was. She said, yeah, it's up at the top of the hill. I said, can you call me a taxi? And she was pretty aggravated.
Of course.
And I had just bought a pair of black gloves and a black hat. I didn't have any idea of what I looked like at 3 o'clock in the morning with black gloves and black hat knocking on somebody's door. This is the stupidity. This is the stupidity comes with that kind of behavior. She said she would. She called the police instead. And there's a story to it, but in the end, I got arrested with my 4th car and entered the county jail again.
So you're now in Passaic County Jail.
Yeah.
The book is Surviving the County Jail.
The first title to this book before it was published was The White Man's Guide for Surviving the Passaic County Jail. For real. That was the title. Because let me tell you something. I grew up in the suburbs, right? I never knew what it was like to be a minority. I had no idea.
Yeah. You just don't know.
But let me tell you something. I went into Passaic County Jail for the first time in my life. I was the minority.
Because I was going to ask you, what was the dynamics in the jail? Because I remember in your book, there's a lot of references to race and how people were separated and crucial. What was that like?
Well, for myself, the more time I spent in jail, the more people I got to know. And I didn't feel, the races, I didn't feel a big divide. Like, I had friends that were black, I had friends that were Spanish, tight friends that were in jail. I had friends that were like from Yugoslavia and stuff like that played professional soccer in Europe and stuff.
Yeah.
But how I got comfortable there is I played a lot of poker. We play for honey buns and all kind of stuff like that. And when you're playing with guys, we would play 36 hours straight. I mean, that's the addict, like without the drugs. We would get our commissary and it would be the morning. The next morning, people would be getting up for breakfast. We're still playing. 6, 7 guys. So you're playing that kind of hours, and some of the more respected guys in the cell are playing in that game. So you get to know them pretty good. And the best thing you can do is just work out.
Looking back, and you mentioned this before, because your stint in the state prison, you said that's when you were clean, you were eating well, you were working out, and you were structured. You were able to manage that little cell. In the county jail, seems like you found that same structure.
Yeah.
And you thrived underneath that structure.
Yeah.
Isn't it ironic?
Yeah.
Because look what mom and dad were trying to create, the same structure that you rebelled on from the get-go.
It was, the problem was, how was I going to be disciplined without somebody telling me what to do?
Score Rosenberg podcast. Look into that camera and repeat that, my friend.
How was I going to be disciplined without somebody telling me what to do and how to live? And there's a story about that. The last violation I've ever had, the judge that gave me the 4 years probation, the break of a lifetime.
Yeah.
They let me out and I had to come back for sentencing. Bottom line is I gave him 2 dirty urines and he brought me back into the courtroom. The woman that was representing me, the attorney, said, "Don't worry about it. They're going to reinstate your probation. Don't do it anymore." I said, "Okay, I won't." So I go into the courtroom and here's the judge that gave me the break. He said, "Mr. Brew, I remember you." He says, "You're the guy with the business and the kids and had to get out of here." And he says, "You're back at my courtroom." He says, "We're going to reinstate you." He says, "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't lock you up right now." And I was not prepared for that question.
That's a big, heavy question.
I started stuttering. I started, you know what I said to him? I said, "I don't do well when I'm not under supervision," because probation hadn't started when I had those stories. So he says, "What do you want, probation to live with you in your house?" And people were snickering in the courtroom and everything else, but it was true. He says, "When you come back into my courtroom," he says, "which I have no doubt in my mind that you will," he says, "I don't want you to open your mouth, and I'm going to give you the 4 years that you're going to get in prison, and with your record, you're going to do every day of it." I have not used since that day.
What was the name of that judge?
Judge Reddin.
I know that judge.
And I'm blessed today to be raising our grandson, my wife and I. The woman that
you met,
that dumped me, that I went off the deep end, she's now my wife. So
what's her name?
Elena.
Wow. It is so amazing that you brought that back around. Because you know what's so funny? I'm going through this. It's like a movie that I'm watching, right? Talking to you, and I'm saying to myself, please let that lady come back in the picture. While you were telling me that she said, "Screw you," in my mind, I'm like, I'd want that lady to come back into the picture. And she's back in the photo, and she's no, because of that, you've now.
Here's the miracle.
Wow.
Here's the miracle. When that relationship ended, what happened was I was using a needle with heroin behind her back for 6 months. She didn't know it. And one day I fell asleep on the bed like this, and she looked at my arms, and that was it, right? Her whole family knew. They all found out, and they probably thought, anybody most people think if you use a needle, you got AIDS.
Yeah.
And her father, her mother thought this guy is doing this and having relations with my daughter. So like that was never, ever going to happen. Today, it's like it never happened.
Wow.
With my family, but last 8 months ago, we were in family court getting some residential custody of my grandson.
Yeah.
And I took a walk around, and Judge Reddin's still in there.
Yeah, he
still
is.
practicing.
Yeah.
I walk into the courtroom. All these years, I wanted to thank him for the break. I sat down. He was holding court. How am I going to interrupt court? I'm not going to interrupt court. Maybe in between.
Yeah.
I say, he has an office there.
Yeah, he does.
I went into the I knocked on the door. They buzzed me in. And I asked the woman, I'd like to talk to the judge. Maybe she thought maybe I was there to knife him or something, or they can't just let anybody talk to him. And I said, I wrote a book about my experience, and he was the judge. She said, you wrote a book? I said, oh, yeah. So as soon as I said that, it got 10 minutes later, he came out and talked to me.
Did he remember you?
Yeah, he remembered me, and I got to thank him. You know.
Wow. Dennis Brew. Imprisoned by addiction. You know what's so funny is we've taken this walk and we haven't really dissected like this whole experience. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to close, right? You're going to do a read, but we're going to do a follow-up podcast with you.
Okay.
I'd like to have you back, and in detail we can chop down some of the experiences in this book. I love the attention to detail that you've shared. So as we get ready to close, Dennis, and I just wanted to, there's a question I ask all my guests. Every single guest, and when we close, we ask the same question. And the question is, considering your journey, considering where you are now, I give you the magic wand. 2 wishes you have. 2 wishes. What can you do? Just gave you the magic wand. 2 wishes. You can, any 2 things you want. What do you want to do? First wish.
First wish would be that I could have been there for my daughters, because I wasn't there. I was in jail. I was out of jail. That I could have possibly made a difference. And I guess the second wish ties into that maybe I could have avoided the addiction in some way, to where, you know, my family taught me values.
I can tell.
When I was using, they were out the window. As soon as I put down the drugs,
They were right
come
there.
right back. So I wasn't capable of passing the values the way they were taught to me.
Because you
now,
weren't there.
and just like my story, where I have 2 brothers that are fine, and I was the one that went through it. I have a daughter that's I don't know how she turned out so well, and the other daughter that struggles.
All right.
You know.
Wow. So just to recap, your 2 wishes would be, 1, to redo and be there for your daughters because you were on that journey, and 2, to, you know, take that structure and have that established there and share that structure with your kids now. Can I just share this with you, that knowing you just now, the journey you went on, as colorful as it was, as painful as it was, has made you who you are. And as I'm sitting here from you, you mentioned one of the most profound things. You said, God had a plan in my life. Judge Reddin played a role in that. So you did well, my friend. SQR podcast, Cole Rosenberg, my guest, Dennis Brew. Thank you so much for rocking in. Amazing podcast. Yo, we're going to take a quick break, come back. Dennis is going to do a read from his book, Imprisoned by Addiction. Where can I get this, by the way?
You can go to the Nook or the Kindle. It's available on an e-reader.
Yeah.
Or you can also email me at dennisbrew@ymail.com, and you can get the book.
We're going to have this up so you can get some of this knowledge in your life. Thank you so much. Squirrel Rosenberg podcast, Dennis Brew, Imprisoned by Addiction. Fascinating podcast. 1.
We pulled up to the jail. One cop gets out and pushes the buzzer to open the big automatic overhead garage door and gets back in. After a few minutes, the door slowly rolls up, and we pull in, and it slowly rolls down. They get out and lock their guns in the gun box on the wall. They open the door, and I get out. The officer controlling the door pops the next door, and we step in. They take the cuffs off, and I put my hands on the wall. I noticed a sign painted on the wall that I used to get a kick out of is no longer there. It used to say, "Welcome to the Passaic County Jail. This is not a country club." It used to be at eye level and was right where you put your hands on the wall. Now, all down the wall at eye level was no talking, hands on the wall, no talking, hands on the wall. The CO takes my $7 and change and $2 bills and gives me a money receipt. I give him my boots and he gives me a pair of Bobos in my size and takes my belt. The cops make small talk and the CO puts an oversized key into the lock on a windowless steel door, turns it and opens the door. I step in and the door closes with that familiar metallic clank that I promised myself 2 years before never to hear again. The cell is 8 by 12 with a wood bench running the length of both long walls and a steel door with a thick Lexan window on the short wall. Behind me is the windowless door that I just stepped through, and there's the standard stainless steel sink and toilet unit, no toilet paper in sight. There's a payphone on the wall over each bench. I sat down on the bench and pulled the green sheets out of my pocket and studied them. I looked and looked again and can't believe they didn't charge me with resisting arrest. All the charges I was expecting were there, but no resisting arrest. I see with surprise that the bail is $3,500, no 10%. I look again and count the zeros. That can't be right. I figured the bail would be at least $25,000, no 10%. The first stolen car I ever got caught with was $10,000. This is good news, but also bad news for me, all at the same time. This might sound like a confusing statement for me to make. Let me explain so you can understand. There are two frames of mind that I can have whenever I get locked up. I'll call the first one high bail syndrome. This is a frame of mind that when I had the cuffs went on. This frame of mind is, for me, an easy frame of mind to do time with. When those cuffs went on, I understood the seriousness of the trouble I was in and knew the bail would be so high there was no chance of getting out. $10,000 and up was impossible in my mind. I had been getting high and in trouble for a lot of years, and all those people in my life that once held those get out of jail not for free cards were sufficiently frustrated and sick of my shit. No way were they going to lift a finger to help me. They had too many times only to be let down. When I was in this mindset, I knew I was staying in jail for a while and didn't have a chance of getting out. I knew that my life was inside this building, not what was going on outside. It wasn't that I didn't give a shit about my family or friends. Oops, sorry, there were no friends. Maybe one, Mike Kelly, that tried to help me, but instead got dragged through the mud. Sorry, Mike. Anyway, I had accepted my fate and could not afford to think about what was going on outside. This was my new home and new world, and I had to stay in it. Being locked up there was hard enough, but to be locked up and constantly thinking about what I could be doing or missing my kids was mental torture. I would think about those things, but I would keep them to a bare minimum. The phone was my enemy, and I used it sparingly, more so my mother knew I was all right. Don't get me wrong, the sound of her voice sounded like Beethoven, and I enjoyed the conversations, but I would always feel the weight of being locked up on my shoulders when I hung up the phone and would be depressed for hours. My mother was the only one I ever called in this state of mind. The other state of mind I'll call low bail syndrome. LBS makes time hard to do and is embarrassing. When I have LBS, the thing that fucks me is the word hope. Hope that I can get out on bail. That hope is fueled by the fact that my insides are ripping out from the heroin withdrawal. I'm starving and craving chocolate to almost insanity. I'm also weak and vulnerable to a good number of jacked up inmates. The only thing I can think of are ways to try to come up with the bail to get out of this hell. In this state of mind, I would give my right thumb to get out. This is where the embarrassment comes in. I will suffer the indignity of begging people on the phone to get me out. Bridges I have burned and people I haven't seen in years will get collect calls from me groveling. I feel every word of this embarrassing conversations. The drug withdrawal, the devil, is screaming in my ear. Try someone else. I feel powerless to just let it go and stop embarrassing myself. Low bails cause this state of mind. I would rather have the resisting arrest charge and a high bail than have this low bail. I was already deserving of the jail for the car, but I guess the low bail was God's way of payback for the real low-life thing I did when I stole that girl's purse. Hopefully, I explained what I was talking about with the two states of mind, and now we're on the same page.